Hey everybody, welcome back to 1776 or Bust. So on the table, you see two fantastic striker-fired guns, and I've been waiting to kind of do this comparison for a while because I haven't actually had my Steyr for about probably about I wouldn't say 3 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, maybe longer. But I wanted to do a tabletop comparison because I'm going to be shooting these guns this weekend, trying to kind of look at them both and see what I like and don't like about either one of them. But I will tell you that from my aspect, I would say these guns are very equally matched in a lot of different ways. Now, to begin with, I'll tell you right off the bat that I do think the P-10 does have some slight advantages to the Steyr in certain ways, but I also think the Steyr has some advantages over the P-10. It's just going to be dependent about what you think. Now, if you have not had the fortunate experience of shooting a Steyr, you really have to go out and shoot one. They're extremely accurate guns. They're amazingly ergonomic. And on top of that, there's very little felt recoil because of where your hand position is. Now, I've done Steyr videos in the past. You can always take a look at those if you choose to. But this one is just really basically to compare these two firearms on the desk and to kind of go over some of the things that I think would appeal to certain buyers and, of course, some things that may not. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the bodies. In other words, how they actually look comparatively speaking to one another. Now, of course, if you take a good look at both of these firearms, you're going to notice that there are some striking similarities to both. Now, obviously, the Steyr has a much more dramatic shape to the grip, whereas the P-10 is a little bit more straight up. However, if you look at the way this is cut in the back here, and this is cut in the back where the web of your hand is going to sit, you'll notice that you actually get a very good, I guess you can say, grip on the gun, so to speak. And what I mean by that is that on the P-10, what you'll notice is that when you go to grab that gun, the gun really does, kind of mold right into your hand because you're sitting so far underneath that slide. And I think that's what really gives a P-10 quite an advantage over a lot of other firearms that are available today, only because you can get such a nice deep purchase on the gun, which makes it extremely controllable. Plus, you have a very low slide height. So those two things combined make this gun a very good choice for people, especially if they're more apt to feel that recoil and not really like the way it feels. Now, in regards to the Steyr has a lot of those good qualities as well. Now, again, you'll see that you have this really deep cut underneath the slide and into the polymer of the frame. And what you're going to find is when your hand goes in, your hand absolutely just gets eaten up by this gun, and it is extremely comfortable. Now, I know a few people have them, and everybody who has owned one of these and has bought one has always said ergonomically it feels really good. It may look very dramatic in regards to the grip angle, but once you feel the gun, you're going to realize that this gun sits in your hand very nicely. Now, of course, if you want to talk about slide height for both, who do I think has the advantage? I actually think the advantage goes to the Steyr. But again, I think Steyr really borrowed a lot of that concept from CZ, being that the actual slide, you can see how that slide rides right into that frame. So, I mean, there's definitely some borrowing going on. And that, of course, is another word for, taking other people's ideas. So let me just focus a little bit more on these guns on the table so you can see them a little bit clearer. Now, the P-10, basically the same concept. You have this idea where you have this gun, and the gun itself, again, very slow or very low. But unfortunately, unlike the other CZs, it's not riding inside the frame. Now, if you have a CZ, let's say P-01 like I do, or any of the 75Bs, what you're going to find is that slide does ride inside the rails of the frame. And this one tends to ride a little bit on the outside. However, because they have such a deep undercut here, you don't really notice the height of the slide as much, only because your hand is sitting so low, or I guess you could say your hand is sitting so far underneath the slide, which is a very good thing. Now, if you were going to put a comparison on both of these, one on top of the other, just to kind of show you what I'm talking about in regards to the way these grips are, and I'll line these up as best I can, what you're going to notice is that the angle of the grips are significantly different. It may not look that way, and you may not be able to tell, but if I turn it around here, and by the way, both these guns have no rounds in the chamber, but if you look at the grips of the guns, you'll notice, let me just try to straighten this out for you here. There we go. What you're going to notice is that your Steyr actually has more of an angled grip, whereas, again, as I said before, the CZ is a little bit straighter. However, because both of them have pretty good undercuts underneath the frame, or in the frame, and underneath that slide, your hand sits and rests very comfortably inside the gun. Now, of course, the Steyr does a better job, I think, of it, as you'll notice. Let me just turn these around really quick. As you'll notice, put them like that right there. As you'll notice, there's a little less polymer in this area here as opposed to the P10. So you do get a little bit less of that undercut here than you do on the Steyr. And because this angle is a little bit more dramatic than the P10, you're also going to see that it seems like the grip is a little bit longer. But as I stated in other videos, it may look longer, but because it's at such a drastic angle, it actually is not as long as you think it would be. Now again, and we'll just make sure that's clear for everybody. There you go, clear. We'll do a trigger pull, and you guys can see that the triggers on both are actually very good. Now, if I had to pick one that's better than the other, I would give the edge, a slight edge to the P10. And the only reason why I say that is because the P10 has a much better reset than the Steyr. Now, that would be my only complaint about the Steyr, is that the reset is terrible on it. And when I say terrible, I don't mean necessarily a very long reset. What I mean by that is basically a reset that is not very tactile at all. And is barely audible. So this is the CZ P10, which I'm sure you've seen a million times. So you'll notice that on the P10, let me get this to, there we go. The P10 has a bit of take up there, as you can see. So it's pretty long on the take up. But once you hit the wall, it's a very, very crisp, very, very light push, very nice trigger. And then here's your reset. So it's extremely short. It's one of the best resets I have on any pistol, bar none. And then, of course, there's your secondary shot. So, I mean, it's a very nice trigger, as you heard, and I'll do that reset again for you. The reset is very audible. It's not extremely tactile, but very audible. You know, whether or not that matters, it's totally up to the shooter. Some shooters get caught up in it. I don't personally, because if I'm in a panic situation, I'm just going to be pulling the trigger anyway. Now, the Steyr, again, very nice trigger. Okay, I know it seems a little bit bulky and fat, but it's actually very nice. But you'll notice that that take up is barely anything at all. So it's extremely short. So the longest part of the take up is pushing in the dingus of the trigger. That's right, Coda Boy, dingus. Now, of course, when you look at that dingus in the trigger, you give it a pull back and it's very, very short. There's your wall. And it's extremely, extremely smooth, light trigger pull on that one. Again, here's your reset. Barely audible, barely tactile, but it's very short as well. And you have your very quick secondary shot. Now, the reason why I say the CZ gets the credit for having the better trigger is just because you have that more clear, definitive reset in the gun. Now, whether or not that matters to you, it may not. To me, it doesn't matter so much as long as it shoots when I pull the trigger. That's all that really matters to me. Overall, they're both fantastic guns. If you wanted to look at the size of both to get a good comparison, I will tell you that the P10 is thinner in the grip than the actual Steyr. That is a definite, no doubt about it. However, the Steyr is not uncomfortable. You know, you can see how it kind of bevels out on the sides here, whereas the P10 is a lot more streamlined. So, you know, it could be a little difficult for people with smaller hands, but honestly, guys, I've never had any issues with it. I have probably large hands, but it's very comfortable. I like where the finger grooves are. It's very, very ergonomic for most people. Again, if you want to look at the height of the grips, we'll put these on their backs, and then we'll take a look at the side. You can see really that there's very little, let me just do that one more time, very little significant difference between the grip length. Okay, the Steyr actually, just because it's angled a little bit more dramatically, sticks out a little bit more in the front end of the grip, whereas the CZ does not, but it does have that extended back right there. So, I mean, there's give and take in both. Quality of polymer, the Steyr is not bad. The P10 I think is a little bit better, only because you don't see much of the molding lines on it. On the Steyr, it's very, very noticeable. Let's see if I can get the camera to actually zoom in on this, or at least get it in the shot. I don't know if I'll be able to unless I zoom in. So hold on one second. Come on, you can do it, camera. There we go. So you can see right there, you know, that's kind of the molding mark on the handgun. I mean, does it make a difference? Not really. It doesn't make a difference, guys. It's not going to change how good the handgun is at all. It's just going to be a matter of what you think looks good and what doesn't. I mean, overall, both are excellent firearms. I'm really excited to go shooting both of them this weekend because I think they're, you know, obviously they're both going to perform very well. But it's going to be interesting to see which one I feel has less recoil. Again, I did put a DPM system in this gun, and just so you can see it, there's the DPM. And I'm kind of excited to see how it's going to shoot with that because the bore axis is so low and because this was an excellent shooter before it even had that. So again, both are great guns. Both have great advantages. it's really going to be dependent on what hype you get caught into, you know, and I think that's an important thing to understand. A lot of people, when they hear the word CZ or the letters CZ, they're like, oh man, great quality, great firearms, and they'd be right. And a lot of times when people hear the word Steyr, they're like, what? Most people don't even know what a Steyr is. But the M9s, guys, are excellent firearms. I have not had one issue with this gun at all. I actually love this gun. I carried it today, actually, for the first time in a couple of weeks. So I'm really excited to be carrying it. But you can see it just fits everything. You know, the undercut here with the trigger guard is excellent because it swoops back. So you get a very nice deep purchase into the gun. And you can see how far it actually sits back into the webbing of my hand. Again, if you compare that to the P-10, the P-10 is pretty close too. You know, if we do it side by side, I would tell you that they're both neck and neck. Obviously, the P-10 being a little thinner, and you can even see that from the profiles of the slide. It's a little bit thinner. But yeah, both great guns. So that's a very quick tabletop. I'm going to shoot this on either Saturday or Sunday. I'll have some range footage for that, and I'll give you some thoughts on the comparison of how they both shot, especially with that DPM system into it. And we'll go from there. So I hope you guys have a great night. Have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. And as always, freedom is never free.